Beware the beast man, for he's the devil's pawn. With that begins one of the wildest, craziest films we'll ever review here on Drew Reviews, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And it's next. Hey guys, welcome back. And today we're going to look at a movie that I just absolutely love. It's completely bonkers. It's Beneath the Planet of the Apes. You know, I like movies that are sci-fi and horror and action. Well, this has sci-fi and action for sure. And I'm going to give you a real brief synopsis so we can get into the things about this movie that I like. Basically, this movie starts off right where the other one ends. Taylor and Nova are headed up that beach on the horse, and they go into the Forbidden Zone. You've got pillars of fire coming up. The ground is cracking beneath them, which is a really cool effect for 1970. You know, you've got lightning all around the horse. Taylor goes to check it out, and suddenly he disappears, leaving Nova by herself. So she goes back to find Zira and Cornelius, and along the way, there's been this astronaut named Brent who is following the same trajectory as Taylor, trying to find him like a rescue mission. And so he ends up getting thrown through the same wormhole and ends up on the same monkey planet and crashes in a different spot. But him and Nova end up meeting each other. He sees her dog tags that say Taylor on them, and he's like, "Take me to Taylor." So Brent is played by James Franciscus, who was in a lot of TV movies in like the '60s, and a pretty good-looking guy. He bears a lot of resemblance to Charlton Heston, although he's much more pretty than Charlton Heston. As a matter of fact, when I was making notes for this, the word pretty came to mind. And so I automatically thought of that guy who fights Jean-Claude Van Damme in that parking garage in Lionheart. You're so pretty, I don't know if I want to fight you, or I'll put that up there for you guys to see. Zira goes to take Brent to Cornelius and Zira, but before they do, there's this little amphitheater where they're having this discussion about what to do about what's going on in the Forbidden Zone. You've got the different classes of the apes. You know, you've got the chimps, the scientific ones. You've got the gorillas, the militant ones, and you've got the orangutans who, they're the more philosophical. And this movie has a pretty good social commentary because, they're all segregated into their groups, which you're talking, this was filmed in '69. Still talking segregation back then. There's a lot of the militant side, the guerrillas taking control, and so that could be seen as a commentary on communism, possibly. So there's a lot of social issues going on in this movie. So Nova takes Brent to Cornelius and Zira, and they try to help them. They give them some supplies and everything, but of course they get caught, and so Zira has to help them escape again. And so the guerrillas are on their trail, and as the guerrillas are chasing Brent and Nova back toward the Forbidden Zone, they head down this rock crevice, and there's this subterranean tunnel leading underneath this rubble. And so they go in there, and that is where this movie goes nuts. This movie, from this point forward, becomes this magnificent fever dream. That's the only way I can put it. Up to this point, this movie has been a true sequel to the first. A lot of the same elements, a lot of the same characters. At about that 45-minute mark, this film becomes its own thing, and it's wild. And this leads to what I said to you earlier is the best part of the movie. You've got the New York City subway station and parts of New York from 2,000 years ago. You got stalactites and stalagmites growing over everything. They're at the Queensboro station, and Brent's, wondering what the heck is going on. Suddenly there's this loud humming, and so they follow it, and it takes them, of course, down the subway tunnel through these corridors, which were later used in other Planet of the Apes movies, which is pretty cool. They, go by the New York Stock Exchange, which is crumbled. And all these are matte paintings, and they're amazing. They go past that. They go past the library. It's the amount that they were able to do with the practical effects here for 1970 is just so awesome. The effect does look like an effect because it was made in 1970, but it's still done so well, with the dilapidated subway system, that you can't help but look at it in awe. Like I said in one of my Ask Drews, I love looking at just old matte paintings and just pausing the frame and looking at the art that's gone into that. And there's a lot of that here. So they end up coming to this church and they meet these mutants. They're people like you and I, except they've evolved enough to where they can use telekinesis to speak to each other. They can also use it, to harm you, with the visions and with high piercing sounds and everything. And we find out they're the ones behind the visions at the beginning of the movie. As a matter of fact, if you watch the first movie where there's like, thunder and lightning with no rain, I actually wonder if they were behind that, even though, that part of the script hadn't been thought up yet. That's something to retroactively look at, and it's kind of cool to think about. So there's like 5 or 6 of these people, and they're interrogating Brent, and it's hilarious because they'll look at him and they'll kind of nod, and you'll hear a ding, and they can talk to him without asking him anything. And at first it's kind of hokey, but after a while you get used to it. But there's one, it's the fat guy. He really is getting into it. He's like that. And there was a better way to do that. I don't know, just maybe use your eyebrows or something, like you're concentrating, but they really over pantomime what they're doing here. Basically, they're interrogating them because they know the apes are on this planet and they know that they are going to be their mortal enemies. And so they worship this bomb, this atomic bomb with the Alpha and Omega sign on it. And this thing is funny because it looks like a 30-30 shell. And so they have it up in church like an idol, and they're worshiping this thing. And Brent's like, my God, doing his best Charlton Heston. And speaking of, once they get what they need out of Brent, they throw him in this jail. And guess who's there? It's Chuck Heston. And he's like, Brent, and he's like, Taylor. And they have this moment. And then the mutants make them fight. And they almost fight to the death. It's kind of like Spock and Kirk, in Star Trek. But it's at that point that the guerrillas storm the subway and they get into the compound and the church. And the mutants know they're about to die, so they take their faces off, which were masked to make them look better. They looked like people before. Well, now, they got all the fallout from the radiation. And the effect they use, the makeup effects they use, are top notch for 1970. Just like those monkey masks and the effects and everything. This was amazing. They got the veins on the outside of their head, and they're all pale. And I really, really like the attention to detail there. So we have that final climactic fight there in the sanctuary of that church. You've got the apes on one side and the mutants on another, and you've got Taylor and Brent on another. And Brent's taking people out with a gun. He ends up getting shot in the head and dying. And then you have Taylor, and he gets shot through the chest. And as he's dying, he has this last final conversation with Zaius from the first movie before he hits that plunger and just blows up the entire world. So that was Beneath Planet of the Apes from 1970. And the whole reason this film got made was because Fox was about to go out of business. They were about to declare bankruptcy. They had some flops like Tora 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 and Hello Dolly, which one of those sets was used here, in the subterranean lair. And Planet of the Apes, the original, made so much money and was such a hit that they immediately greenlit this for like half the budget. So they had to cut costs in some places. Like there's some monkey masks that are pretty dodgy in this. But yeah, for the most part, I love this movie. The first half is more of the same. You've got Brent instead of Charlton Heston. Heston did not want to reprise his character. He was done with the franchise. They talked him into a cameo, and he said, that's fine, I'll pass it off. And then they talked him into doing the last scene, and he's like, okay, I'll do that. And he ended up donating all of his money to charity. You've got Brent taking his place, James Franciscus, and he doesn't have the physical presence that Charlton Heston does, but he does a good enough job in this movie. He does a workman's job. Linda Harrison as Nova is smoking hot in this movie as she was in the first movie. I think she was in even better shape in this movie, so, nothing like a beautiful woman in a loincloth. But anyway, in the first movie, you've got Zaius, and he's very much the enemy to Taylor in that first movie. In this movie, it's almost as if he's come around a little bit, and he's actually listening to ideas, and he's the open-minded one. Like, there's a scene where the mutants are throwing up, illusions to the gorillas, and he's the one who sees through it. And I like the character arc that character had from the first movie to this movie. And as a matter of fact, um, I like the first Planet of the Apes movie, and I like this movie. And like I said, this one's better than this one, but I like this one for the wild, bonkers ideas. But these two movies are the only two Planet of the Apes movies for me. You know, it starts when Taylor gets on that planet and they start exploring that planet in the first movie, and it ends when Taylor blows it up in the second movie. You know, how can you have Cornelius and Zira, get into his ship and go to Earth in that third one when they were just there helping Brent and Nova earlier in that second? It makes no sense to me. So as far as things I liked about this film, like I said earlier, it's like somebody had a fever dream or something. This was filmed the year that Woodstock happened, so there may have been some psychedelics used, with the mutants and all the underground stuff. But I love that. I love all the sets of the underground. I love the bleak ending of this movie. Every now and again, you just need a bleak ending. Like, I think Escape from LA is a fun movie, but it's not very good. I think I'm going to review that here fairly soon. But the ending of that movie makes that movie. Like when Snake resets the world, and in this movie they just blow it all up. No retreat, no surrender. I like that about this movie. I like these subterranean telepathic mutants in this movie. I like how devout they are to their beliefs, like to a fault. They've got this bomb that they're worshiping, that looks like a 15-foot rifle shell, and they are blindly, loyally devoted to this thing. And I like how well they're written like that. As far as things that I didn't care for as much, Cornelius and Zero had a lot more to do in that first movie, and they weren't there as much in the second movie. I felt like maybe needed that familiarity a little bit. You got that with Nova, and you got that a little bit with Taylor, but I felt like they could have did more. In the first movie, Jerry Goldsmith did the score, and it was wild. It had this crazy jazzy thing going on throughout. It felt otherworldly. And this one was done by somebody else who tried to, no pun intended, ape Goldsmith's score, and it just wasn't as successful, in my opinion. I know I'm a music guy, obviously, and I feel bad because I always forget to talk about the score, but I thought I'd throw that in because to me the score left me a little wanting, especially in context with that first movie. All right, guys, it's confession time. I had never seen Planet of the Apes or Beneath the Planet of the Apes until about 6 years ago. I had this friend of mine that I used to work with, and he was telling me all about Beneath the Planet of the Apes and the mutants and, the veiny heads and everything, and just how wild it was. And so they came on and like a marathon, and I DVR'd those two. Actually, I DVR'd like 4 or 5 of them, and I fell in love with these two. But anyway, he was telling me how he saw this during its original theatrical run in 1970 at this historic theater we have in my town called the Melba. It's one of those 50s style theaters, probably 30s style theaters, really. That it closed down a couple years before I was born. So my entire child life and adult life, clear up until a couple years ago, this thing was dilapidated, and they actually restored it. So I'm actually going to see if they will play like the Planet of the Apes there sometime. We've got this nice theater, and they ought to be doing like film festivals and everything. But anyway, that was the first time I'd heard about these. And Planet of the Apes, I'd rate pretty high. This I'd rate quite a bit lower. But as I said, I do like it a little bit more for just the zany ideas and the stuff they were brave enough to try. I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10. It's fun. It is a flawed film. Like I said, that first half feels like a sequel, like a milk it, cash cow, cash grab kind of thing. But the second half of this movie makes the entire first half worthwhile. So guys, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. If you haven't already done so and you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell and everything. Let me know what you'd like to see down in the comments. Like I said, I do sci-fi, action, and horror mainly. But as always, I've enjoyed talking to you guys. And I'm Andrew, and I'll see you down the line.